every gaze locked on Paris Jackson as she rises from the second row, her hands trembling around a sealed white envelope that holds secrets no one could have predicted. It's day 17 of Sean Diddy Combs' blockbuster trial, a spectacle already brimming with scandal, but nothing has prepared the crowd for this moment. Photographers were banned from the press gallery, leaving only hushed whispers and scribbling pens to capture the scene as Paris, Michael Jackson's daughter, steps forward, her face a mask of serene resolve. "My father sent this," she says, her voice barely audible yet piercing. And it's about him. The room falls silent, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Diddy, seated just 10 feet away, stares straight ahead, his usual swagger replaced by a flicker of unease. The judge, a veteran of countless high-profile cases, hesitates before accepting the envelope, his fingers brushing the worn paper as if it might burn. Inside lies a single handwritten note, signed by Michael Jackson, a name that still conjures awe, controversy, and untouchable legend. As the judge reads the first line aloud, it lands like a thunderclap. Some men in this field will put a grin on their face as they steal your soul behind your back. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. This isn't just evidence. It's history unfolding. A ghost speaking through ink and paper, and Paris Jackson, with her steely will and quivering hands, is its messenger. The trial had already been a circus, with tabloids feasting on every detail, hidden audio tapes, tearful confessions from B-list celebrities, and whispers of Diddy's iron grip on the music industry. But Paris's appearance was a curveball no one saw coming, not even the seasoned court reporters who'd covered every twist. She hadn't been on the witness list, hadn't been spotted in the courthouse corridors, and yet here she was, a vision in a simple black blazer, her presence commanding the room without a single raised voice. The envelope, unmarked by any logo or official seal, felt like a relic from another era, its weight more than just paper. As the judge unfolded it, the crowd leaned forward, straining to catch every word. Michael's handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, deliberate, and hauntingly personal. "I've met men like Sean Combs," the note continued, "men who lift you up only to clip your wings, who smile while they take what's yours. I pray my daughter never crosses his path." The words hung in the air, each syllable a dagger aimed at Diddy, whose legal team was already huddling, their whispers frantic. Paris stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the judge, as if she'd fulfilled a sacred duty simply by delivering her father's message. This wasn't Paris's plan. She'd spent the night before tossing in her bed, staring at the ceiling of her Los Angeles apartment, her heart pounding with an inexplicable urgency. The trial had dominated headlines for weeks, each revelation about Diddy's alleged manipulation and control chipping away at her resolve to stay silent. She'd tried to ignore it, to bury herself in her music and activism, but the stories of young artists coerced, of dreams twisted into nightmares, echoed too closely to warnings her father had whispered when she was a child. "Some people in this industry don't want your light, Paris," he told her one night at Neverland Ranch, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. "They want to bottle it, sell it, and leave you empty." She was only 9 then, too young to grasp the depth of his words, but they'd stayed with her, tucked away like the letter she'd found years later in a fireproof vault among his belongings. That letter, written in Michael's careful script, was meant for her alone, a private caution filled with names and riddles she couldn't decipher as a teenager. But now, at 27, with Diddy's trial laying bare a pattern of control, those riddles had snapped into focus. "He takes, not builds," Michael had written, and Paris knew she could no longer stay on the sidelines. The decision to act came at dawn. She'd pulled the letter from its hiding place, her fingers tracing the folds her father had made, and booked a last-minute flight to New York. No one knew she was coming. Not her team, not the prosecutors, not even her family. She slipped into the courtroom just before the session began, her head bowed, the envelope tucked inside her jacket like a talisman. When she stood to approach the bench, it wasn't with the flair of a celebrity seeking attention, but with the quiet gravity of someone carrying a legacy. The courtroom, already buzzing with the day's proceedings, fell into a hush so profound that a dropped pen echoed like a gunshot. Even Diddy's attorneys, known for their unshakable poise, seemed caught off guard, their eyes darting between Paris and their client. The judge, after a whispered exchange with the clerk, nodded for her to proceed, and Paris's voice, though soft, carried a weight that silenced every rustle. "This is from my father," she repeated, handing over the envelope. "He wrote it for me, but it's about what's happening here." As the judge read Michael's words aloud, the courtroom transformed into something beyond a legal arena. It became a stage for legacy, a battleground for truths long buried. The letter didn't just name Diddy, it painted a vivid picture of a man Michael had seen through, a man whose charm masked a hunger for control. "Silence is the sound of shock," Michael wrote, a phrase that now seemed to describe the courtroom itself. Paris took her seat, her role as messenger complete, but the impact of her father's words was just beginning to ripple. The prosecution, sensing a turning point, leaned into the moment, arguing that Michael's note wasn't mere hearsay, but a prophetic blueprint of Diddy's behavior. They connected it to Zanaya's testimony, a young singer who tearfully recounted how Diddy had promised her stardom, only to trap trap her in a web of manipulation. The parallels were uncanny. Michael's warnings about clipping wings mirrored Zanaya's story of broken promises and silenced dreams. The jury, their faces a mix of awe and unease, scribbled notes furiously, their attention undivided. Diddy's legal team, however, wasn't about to let the moment stand unchallenged. The lead attorney, a sharp-dressed veteran known for dismantling emotional appeals, rose with a calculated smile. "This is a letter, not evidence," he declared, his voice dripping with skepticism. "A private note from a man known for his colorful imagination, written years ago with no legal weight." He gestured toward a stack of glossy photos, images of Michael and Diddy grinning together at award shows and charity galas. "If Mr. Jackson feared my client, why did he pose for these pictures? Why did he share stages, smiles, and handshakes?" The defense's strategy was clear: paint Michael as unreliable, his warnings as the ramblings of a troubled genius. But Paris, called to the stand, didn't flinch. Leaning into the microphone, she met the attorney's gaze with a calm that unnerved even him. "You learn to smile in this industry," she said, her voice steady. "You smile for cameras, for deals, for survival. My father knew the cost of saying no to powerful men. That's why he wrote this, for me, to protect me." The courtroom absorbed her words in silence, the weight of her truth heavier than any photo. The defense's next move was to question the letter's authenticity. "No notary, no witnesses, no date," the attorney pressed, his tone suggesting Paris might have fabricated the note in a fit of grief or vendetta. "How do we know this wasn't written by someone else, or influenced by Miss Jackson's emotions?" Paris's response was a masterclass in composure. "Not every truth needs a stamp," she said, her eyes sweeping the jury. "This was my father's voice, written for his daughter, not a courtroom. Some secrets you keep until you have no choice." The judge, visibly moved, overruled the defense's objections, allowing the letter as evidence. The prosecution seized the opportunity, introducing a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the room. A voicemail from Michael, discovered on an old attorney's phone, never meant for public ears. The clerk played it, and Michael's voice, distinct, weary, and laced with urgency, filled the courtroom. "Stay far away from Sean Combs," he said, his words trembling with paternal fear. "Paris must not be exposed to that environment. I beg you." The silence that followed was deafening, as if time itself had paused to let the ghost of Michael Jackson speak. Diddy, who'd maintained a stoic front throughout the trial, showed the first crack in his armor. He leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyers, his jaw tight. Then, in a rare break from protocol, he stood, his voice sharp with defiance. "This is a smear campaign," he snapped, pointing at the prosecution. "Michael Jackson was paranoid, talking about aliens, conspiracies, you name it. Now we're supposed to believe him?" The outburst drew a swift gavel from the judge, who ordered Diddy to speak only through counsel, but the damage was done. His polished image, carefully curated over decades, was fraying, and the jury noticed. The prosecution pounced, their closing argument a rhetorical masterpiece. "How many times does a man have to be right before we stop calling him paranoid?" they asked, their words aimed at the jurors' hearts. Michael Jackson saw the truth about Sean Combs, and his daughter had the courage to bring it here. "This isn't paranoia, it's a pattern." They pointed to Zanaya's testimony, to other witnesses who described Diddy's control, and now to Michael's warnings, a chorus of voices painting an undeniable picture. Outside the courthouse, the story was already spiraling into a global phenomenon. With cameras barred, court reporters' live tweets became the world's lifeline to the drama. Each word of Michael's letter, he lifts people to clip their wings, igniting social media like wildfire. News anchors scrambled to analyze the phrase, while fans and skeptics clashed online. Some hailing Michael as a prophet, others dismissing the letter as a stunt. Paris, unaware of the frenzy, remained in the courtroom, her gaze steady as the defense tried one last gambit. They called a surprise witness, a former associate of Michael's, who claimed the letter might have been written under duress during a turbulent period in the star's life. But the witness faltered under cross-examination, unable to explain why Michael's warnings aligned so precisely with Zanaya's allegations. The prosecution's final move was to replay the voicemail, letting Michael's voice linger in the air, a father's plea that no one could unhear. As the day's session ended, Paris left the courthouse through a side exit, avoiding the swarm of reporters clamoring for a soundbite. She'd done what she came to do, delivered her father's truth, not for fame or revenge, but for the legacy he'd entrusted to her. The courtroom, though, was forever changed. Jurors, once skeptical, now wore expressions of quiet conviction, their notepads filled with quotes from Michael's letter. Even the judge, known for his impartiality, seemed shaken, his rulings tinged with a reverence for the history unfolding before him. Diddy's team, sensing the tide turning, huddled late into the night, their strategy unraveling as the world outside dissected every word of the trial. Michael Jackson's shadow loomed larger than ever, not as a pop icon, but as a father whose warnings had outlived him, carried by a daughter who refused to let them fade. The letter's impact didn't stop at the courthouse doors. By evening, it was the top story on every major outlet, from TMZ to CNN, with headlines screaming, "Michael Jackson's chilling warning about Diddy revealed." Commentators debated its significance. some calling it a vindication of Michael's long-disputed claims about the industry, others questioning why Paris had waited so long to act. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like Justice for Michael and Diddy trial, fans posting side-by-side images of Michael's letter and Zanaya's tearful testimony, drawing connections no one could ignore. Paris, back in her hotel room, scrolled through the chaos on her phone, her heart heavy but resolute. She hadn't spoken to the press, hadn't tweeted, hadn't done anything to fuel the fire. Her silence was her power, a contrast to the noise she'd unleashed. Back in the courtroom the next day, the prosecution built on the letter's momentum, calling witnesses who corroborated Michael's warnings. A former music executive testified about Diddy's ruthless business tactics, describing deals that left artists broke and broken. Another, a choreographer who'd worked with both Michael and Diddy, recalled tense encounters where Michael seemed wary of Diddy's influence. He changed the subject whenever Combs came up, she said, her voice trembling. It was like he knew something we didn't. The defense countered with character witnesses, industry giants who praised Diddy's philanthropy and mentorship, but their polished testimonials felt hollow against the raw emotion of Michael's words. The jury, now visibly engaged, leaned forward during every mention of the letter, their skepticism toward Diddy growing with each passing hour. Paris didn't return to the stand, but her presence lingered. The prosecution projected an enlarged image of the letter's signature, Michael's looping, unmistakable scrawl, as a visual anchor for their case. This is a father's love, they told the jury, a warning meant to protect his daughter from a man he saw for what he was. They wove Michael's words into Zanaya's story, showing how Diddy's alleged pattern of control stretched across decades, from Michael's era to the present. The defense, desperate to regain ground, tried to shift focus to procedural errors, arguing the voicemail's late discovery violated evidence rules, but the judge, unmoved, allowed it, citing its exceptional relevance. The courtroom buzzed as the voicemail played again, Michael's voice a haunting refrain that seemed to grow stronger with each repetition. Diddy's demeanor, once untouchable, continued to crack. He avoided looking at the jury, his hands fidgeting with a pen, a far cry from the confident mogul who'd walked into the trial weeks earlier. His attorneys, sensing the shift, doubled down on discrediting Michael, pulling up old interviews where he'd spoken about government conspiracies and extraterrestrial fears. "This is the man you're trusting?" they asked, their tone mocking. But the prosecution was ready, countering with a clip from a 1990s interview where Michael, calm and lucid, warned about people in this industry who destroy others to get ahead. The contrast was stark. Michael's foresight versus Diddy's deflection, and the jury's faces told the story. They were listening, not just to the lawyers, but to a voice from the past that refused to be silenced. As the trial stretched into its third week, the letter became more than evidence. It was a cultural touchstone. Artists who'd stayed silent for years began speaking out, sharing stories of Diddy's pressure tactics and broken promises. A rapper who'd once been signed to Diddy's label tweeted, "MJ knew, we all knew, but nobody listened." The hashtag #JerMJ.wasRight trended globally, with fans digging up old interviews and lyrics where Michael hinted at industry betrayal. Paris, still silent in public, became an unwitting icon, her courage celebrated by those who saw her as Michael's torchbearer. The media frenzy reached fever pitch, with paparazzi staking out her hotel, desperate for a glimpse of the woman who'd turned the trial upside down. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution's case grew stronger, bolstered by the letter's emotional weight. They called a handwriting expert to authenticate Michael's note, dispelling the defense's claims of forgery. The expert, a gray-haired academic with decades of experience, pointed to unique flourishes in Michael's script, matching them to known samples from his journals. "This is his hand, his voice," she said, her testimony quiet but unshakable. The defense, running out of angles, tried to pivot to Paris's motives, suggesting she'd acted out of loyalty to her father's tarnished legacy. But the jury, swayed by her composure and the voicemail's raw emotion, seemed unmoved by the insinuation. The prosecution's final witness, a former assistant to Michael, sealed the letter's impact. "He was afraid for Paris," she said, tears in her eyes. "He told me to make sure she got that letter if anything happened to him. He knew." The trial's closing arguments were a study in contrast. Diddy, confined to his legal team's strategy sessions, faced a reckoning he'd never anticipated. Michael Jackson, a man dismissed in life as eccentric, was now a prophet in death, his warnings validated by a daughter who'd risked everything to honor them. The courtroom, once a place of law, had become a shrine to legacy, where truth outlasted time and silence spoke louder than any verdict could.